Very strong.
We're live.
Okay. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, April 30th. This is meeting Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We're starting at kind of an unusual time for us, a little after 11 o'clock. We'll be going to 12:30. We're squeezing in some more committee time after morning floor. And probably so thank you to everyone for adjusting on the fly of a new schedule. We have passed out, it's posted on our website, Senate Natural items for further consideration list updated as of today. So this was my best attempt at capturing where we are on the open items we've been going through. And then council, you have an amendment based on our work last week, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we're waiting for copies from the copy still.
It's all ready.
Was already? Oh, we have copies. Thank you so much.
Tony. Well, Tony.
And
Alan.
incoming. Okay, so that draft is is it also posted?
Yes.
Thank you.
2.1.
Draft 2.1 8687 dated 4/29/24 10:41 a.m. So yes, with that, I'd like to go to council and start walking through and see if we can review, close out, and move on with the ongoing discussion. I'll step back one process stepwise. The bill itself has gone today to approach. I think there's the pro tem expressed the hope that it might actually be able to come back out of approach today, which would put it back on notice tomorrow, depending on the sentiments of the minority party. We could suspend rules and take it up for action tomorrow. So that's true. We'll be seeing our prior work already voted out 12 days ago as the basis for a floor report, knowing that what we're working on now will go into a final amendment to be offered by senators from both committees, whoever is interested, for third reading. So it'd be a little unusual that we're going to be presenting stuff that we know here about to amend, but in order to move a bill this big through so many committees, we had to push it out the door 10 days ago. Okay, so Mr. Kowski, if you could take it away, and happily everything we changed was highlighted, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Ellen J. Baxter, Office of Legislative Counsel. So today, looking at the Gray Amendment Draft 2.1 of today's date.
So that flags me to pause and say, not actually, someone has to make a request. So my name's on it. If I'm hopeful that when we're done, that I guess you can decide at the end, that most, if not all, of the senators in this committee will participate in offering the amendment. But we'll see where we went. Okay.
So unlike what we looked, so last week I showed you an amendment that was an instance by instance of amendment. 7 instances, those changes are in this draft.
Okay.
Like you also reflected additional changes after that. As part of your list. And so this is a strike most amendment. It is a strike all to the sections that I wrote. Because you will recall that H687 currently has a number of sections that I did not write.
Yep.
The second half of the bill. So this is striking sections 1 through 71. And it is not making changes to all of those sections. The changes to those sections are highlighted in yellow. This amendment was drafted a half hour ago, so it has not been edited. And it needs to be, because this is a complicated piece of work that you are building. And so I suspect there are typos in it.
Yes.
That's your heads up.
Thank you. Thanks for, I get it. If, if I were in your position, I would sort of hate to have to keep coming in with unedited stuff.
Well, it's just because,
but we have a timeline that doesn't allow for all those gears to turn before we have to meet again. all those gears will turn before we get to the floor.
So. I mean, there's a change on page 1, but you've already seen this change, this is what was in your amendment from last week. It's adding housing to the purpose section. So the other thing that is happening in this amendment, you have already seen, but not in your amendment. It is, in section 2, it's removing the appeals as something that the board will do. So section 2 creates the land use review board with 5 full-time members, but it does not give them the authority to hear permit appeals.
We're back to the land use review board. Not that we have 11.
Oh, but you never left. Well, because last week you were considering an amendment from Senator who's on this committee, and so that amendment has a different name. Your directive has been to keep this name. Which is why my drafting has been.
If someone was wondering why we talk about the name, I would just say because we've had a lot of discussions about, it's not just focused on natural resources, it's about land use and development. And it's a broader picture than only looking at resource impact, so it's time to revise the name, fit the job.
Yes.
Well, I'm correcting. Question, so still is unresolved.
What?
As to appeals,
Oh, yes, yeah, so, well,
we have language that says one thing, but that language may or may not be being resolved.
yes. Well, I mean, let's go through it. Let me back up and say what I asked council to do, which was that, we talked about it a little bit on Friday. We're having a study to look at how appeals could be improved. And there were a number of things we talked about. Timeliness, merits, consolidation, having sort of a mini New Hampshire Housing Board focused subgroup within that board that could deal with sort of expedited processing and applications and appeals of permits. But we don't need such a board yet, even in our own version, what we said, we're going to do that. We also said, well, that board won't take on that job yet, so. Then it was like, okay, we could study it and improve it. That begged the question of why would you commit to doing something if you hadn't yet studied it enough to have a shared sense that yes, this is the right place to land. Some people have landed in that place. And anyway, I think it's not to the detriment of that functioning of that board. Leave the question of will we end up moving there until we've had a study back to the legislature. That was my take, and that's how I had council to draft the package. So if that's not where you are, then please, I don't mean to speak for everyone, but in terms of getting drafts, I try to do my best and bringing forward. I think we've talked. Anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, just because you did ask.
Yeah.
I personally would prefer that we move the appeals process to the LURB in its entirety. But I understand that the process that this committee is going through right now, that is an unlikely position for us to be taking. But I will still happily sign on to an amendment, endorse an amendment that has that. But my personal feeling is that we should move in that direction, we should make that decision. I do have a question. Perhaps whatever the amendment is that comes out of this, we will be having a conference committee. And
I guess.
And my assumption is based on the bill that we've received from the House, this will be a main point of contention. So I did want to flag that I don't expect to be on the conference committee. Or the committee of conference, but I would hope that whatever discussion comes out of that committee of conference, that we seriously do listen to the reasons behind the House's
Sure.
recommendation.
Well, that's part of why I handed out that handout, because that's the case, underlying. That's some of the data underlying the conclusion of some people have had a lot of these involvement, that this really is the preferred path going forward. You know, and I feel like if that is the best idea, the study will reinforce that as opposed to becoming a stumbling block to making that decision. Well, because it's not like we don't need yet to make a commitment to that ultimate pathway, then, okay, it's fair to leave the question open until we have the conversation. For some people, we said, we've had it, I'm all done, I'm good. Other people said, I'm not good yet, so. Okay, back to you, council.
So, on page 5, the land use review board is highlighted mostly to just, I learned that it is still the LURB in this draft. So that isn't a change from your prior draft. Section 8, or I'm sorry, page 8, which is section 4, and then section 5. So both of these sections have references to the appeals in them. And so the board hearing appeals is being struck. So on page 8, section 4, there previously was language for the board to adopt rules of procedure for appeals that has been struck. Then in section 5, the board having authority to hear appeals has been struck.
Each part of why the bill is a shorter bill, is the appeals, all that appeals
I
language.
mean, it's not that much shorter. In fact, it's not shorter, but I just
No, you were,
well,
you were
you added 7 new sections, so just wait, it's, you replaced everything you took out, so. It's not shorter, so on page 15, again, in section 9, the fee section, the filing fees for appeals have been struck. Alright, so page 16 is where the new language starts for you to review. So first, again, there are a few sections that have been struck because the appeals are no longer going to the board. On page 16, section 11 is the appointment. So, you have talked about this, you still have if this has the governor making appointments to the LURB on or before July 1, 2025. That is the date that you passed out of your committee. Originally, you have been considering other dates.
No, it's good, Ms. Keeper.
Okay. So then section 11A is the new section on studying of peace. So on page 16, section 11A. On or before December 15th, 2026. The Land Use Review Board shall issue a report addressing whether to transfer appeals of permit decisions and jurisdictional opinions issued pursuant to chapter 151 to the Land Use Review Board. The board shall convene a stakeholder group composed of a representative of environmental interests, attorneys that practice environmental and development law in Vermont, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, on to page 17, the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, the Land Access and Opportunity Board, the Office of Racial Equity, a representative of nonprofit housing development interests, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and the Agency of Natural Resources in preparing the report.
Does that, I don't have it next to me, the general way I've been talking about the committee is that a board with the same membership as the group that convened to write the necessary updates to Act 250 would be sort of reassembled. Does this match that?
So the legislation that created that, that required that report did not have a stakeholder group as part of it. I believe the NRB created that stakeholder group themselves.
Okay.
So you would need to get confirmation from them that this reflects what they did, because I couldn't find on paper.
Mr. Chairman, I can, if I may, especially John Groveland from the NRC. So Ellen is right. So what I did look, because I helped draft this language, I looked at the provision that created the part of the NRB report. Ellen is correct. There was nothing about a stakeholder group. That was a decision that the NRB made on its own.
Yeah.
And I actually went to the NRB and I said, would you help me work on this? And they basically said, that, you know, the position of administration is that they don't support appeals going to the board, and so they declined, you know, to work on the provision. I understood that, you know, so I basically I did this on my own and talking to other people, and I just tried to pick some groups, and it wasn't just me, I did consult with other people to kind of round out the type of groups that would be interested in this appeal issue. And that's really is reflected in that list. And I didn't say that a big success for the NRB study was they hired a facilitator, but that was their choice, and I think they actually got money to do that, which I don't know that they have now, so I didn't feel comfortable, you know, writing that into it. So yeah, so that's the answer. So this is different because otherwise, if you did with the other study Bill did, you just authorize them to do a study and then leave it to them to figure out whether to engage stakeholders or not. And I thought, just to move this along, we should just like identify the people, and you can debate it, the right people or not. I try to put equity groups on there, I try to put environmental groups, you know, lawyers that practice, planners, municipal groups, I think the Chamber of Commerce is on there.
Thank you very much
Yeah.
for filling in as best we can, given that the NRB wasn't helping you write the list. So for the time being, let's flag it as, if people have an interest in, anyone in the room or who's watching, who says, oh, well, we should have been part of this process, please contact the committee and we'll,
Savannah was on, but now she's gone.
One last thing I'll say is, I do think it's, the study has came over and, it was proposed in the Senator from Hinsdale's amendment, really was focused on whether to do this. I really, our strong recommendation is, you know, take the time to do it, but take the time to look at how to do this. And that's the big change in here, in addition to the groups that get the people together, figure out how we can do this to make this work, make a more efficient process. So that's I think the focal point of the change.
But it does say whether, and that was the request of the chair.
Say whether and how, I don't, is this some, is this posted, because I see the amendment posted, but is this is,
Yeah, so your language uses the base and the
Okay.
chair requested additional changes.
okay.
This chair or?
This chair, yeah, would you like to say anything about what you requested?
yeah, so again, you know, it's like trying to make this, from what I've learned, state see a lot of value in going to the board. And I also felt like there are plenty of people who are detractors from that point of view. So, the idea was convene a working group to examine that particular question. And rather than say we've already made up our mind before we ask the question, say, we're gonna ask it in a neutral way and let the results follow the merits of the report. I think there's many good reasons to be there, but you know, usually if you want to, unless it's going to be a bit of a charade, you ask a question in a neutral way, and then you respond with results. So this tries to be neutral. And I also want to make sure that it lists the things that we want that you to think about. Because I think some of them will help elucidate what advantages or disadvantages. Yeah.
So, right, so in subsection A, it does say whether to transfer, and then if you want to, you could, on the list, you could say. At a minimum, here, if you wanna be like open-ended about who else they should invite. Or if you're gonna add specific other names to the list, you could do that as well. And then, so on page 17, again, this is largely the language that Mr. Groveman submitted, but some of it has changed slightly, so. On page 17,
You're reminding, sorry.
yes,
One of these things about being able to direct the NRB to conduct a particular study that highlights exactly the advantage of the, working through the NRB as opposed to the judicial branch. Is that we can specify what we need done. And when we talk about aspirations for how the environmental division operates, it's another branch of government, we can be as directed, so. It's reminding me as we go through it, one of the reasons it's worth, I think, worth investing further. Okay. Thank you.
So on page 17, the report shall recommend whether to allow consolidation of appeals of the board or with the environmental division of the Superior Court, and how, if transferred to the board, appeals of permit decisions issued under chapter 117, so municipal, and the agency of natural resources can be consolidated with Act 250 appeals. How the board can be directed to prioritize and expedite adjudication of appeals related to housing projects, including the use of hearing officers to expedite appeals and the setting timelines for processing of housing appeals. Procedural rules to govern the board's administration of Act 250 and the adjudication of appeals of Act 250 decisions. These rules shall include procedures to create a firewall and eliminate any potential for conflict with the board managing appeals and issuing permit decisions and jurisdictional opinions. And other actions the board should take to promote the efficient and effective adjudication of appeals, including any procedural improvements to the Act 250 permitting process. And then the report shall be submitted to this committee and economic development, and then House Environment and Energy. So it doesn't mention what you were just talking about, the specific setting of timelines.
Timeliness of appeals and a process.
Well, because you just said that one of the advantages of going to the board would be that you can set statutory deadlines for issuing appeals. Did you want to add language to that effect in here?
I was just trying to highlight one of
Okay.
the, areas where we ran into some disconnect between an aspirational goal expressed about ED versus what we could actually specify here. I think language around, there is a whole thing, and it already says on line 13, page 17, the setting of timelines for processing housing appeals. So I figure like we put the topic on the table.
Okay.
Timely resolution of the basis of the merits is what we work on. Obstructive use of appeal is what we'd like to prevent. Right, any questions? Okay, onward. I'm gonna check off then, item 12 on our list, today's version of the list. Keep track of where we're going. Back to non-council.
So the next changes are pages 24 and 25. This adds the language on accessory on farm business that you did discuss on Friday, so it isn't new. It hasn't been changed since Friday, but it is appearing in this draft.
We said at this point, there was a further discussion brought up about gleaning, and it's like, to me, it's like, okay. Enough already, we don't have time. Gleaning, if someone can figure that out in the next 2 days.
I do just want to bring up, I have a constituent who was interested in expanding the exemptions for events. Wondering if we can thoughts about especially in places that have some kind of site plan review for performances.
So, we are in the closing days of the year 2 of the biennium, and past, with all due respect to any interested party, I wish we had the time and capacity, look at it carefully enough to go get it right. But when we've got into discussions on events, weddings, concerts, food/weddings, whatever, it's become complicated enough that I think we just don't have the time to do a proper job looking at it and So my recommendation to me would be to say, we can't spend more time on accessory on top businesses. This year, what's the big refuge? What,
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate you bringing up the constituents' concerns, I think that's important, and, I know that you're trying to make sure that you're having your voices be heard on this. We have heard the alternative in our district, on this topic, and I think for us to come to a consensus on language would be prolonged. So I agree with you, Mr. Chair, although I think it's something we can certainly talk about in future years.
so, thank you for bringing up. A few relays to your constituents that. We're interested in the conversation for sure, but don't want the capacity to do it properly, if not that. Thank you.
It's not something that anybody. Market sections. On both sides. of the
Luckily, you're not running re-election, so you don't have to deal with
You know, that thought occurs to me before.
it.
That's a problem.
So that's 17A, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep cruising.
The next change is on page 31.
Oh,
On page 31, the State Natural Resources Conservation Council has been added to the stakeholder group for the tier 3 rulemaking.
okay,
Yeah. And that's number 2 on your list.
number 2 on the line, thank you, Senator White.
And thank you to our representatives from the regional planning commissions for helping with that. In trying to know, we did see in the budget that their funding was, at least from the Senate proposal, was properly allocated, so I do think we are doing right by our conservation districts.
On to 33.
Okay, so. The next couple of pages are all changes related to housing exemptions. So first. I almost feel like we should start with the next section first, but
We can skip and come back to that.
so let's come back to section 23. In a minute, so first. On page 33, section 24. So section 24 is the jurisdictional opinion requirement. So, it is required for the prior. Exemption for housing. And based on last week's discussion, you requested, I believe, that the other new. Exemptions, the sunset exemptions be added to the jurisdictional opinion requirement.
The expanded designated areas.
Yes.
And I think if people, especially in case of expanded designated areas, there are gonna be questions about how much of a parcel. You need to have in that area in order to qualify. So in order to create pipeline legal conditions for people. We should try to set ourselves up to be very clear about it. Might take a mini conversation.
Well, and so to be specific, on line 13, it's adding the exemption for accessory dwelling units, which is BB. CC is the construction of improvements for converting commercial space to 29 units or fewer of housing. And then DD is the expanded designated areas.
Thank you.
So there's also some additional new language here. On page 33. So those seeking to qualify for these exemptions need to request a jurisdictional opinion. So there's new language on line 17, notwithstanding any other provisions of law to the contrary. The jurisdictional opinions required in this section shall only be appealed to the Natural Resources Board. Within 30 days of the appeal being filed with the board shall issue a decision on the appeal. The board may adopt rules of procedure for these appeals.
So this is me working with council yesterday, I was asking for new language to try to say. We want to have we want to preserve the right of appeal, we also want to have a timely resolution. It's a proposal. And it hasn't been vetted by any until now, so I'm putting it out there with it as a proposal. But that was the goal. JOs for qualifying for exemptions and then a right to appeal, a single level appeal with a 30-day shot clock on that process. Others will have things to say about it. You know what?
So does this mean that it cannot be appealed to?
Well, it is a little bit vague on that point. And I feel like you asked me to include that and maybe I should be more explicit about it.
Then to get a little further, a recourse on appeal.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I'll just say first. It's not clear as the way that I've drafted it because, I think I really forgot about that. It does say only, I have not researched whether or not limiting an appeal to the Supreme Court would violate the constitutional right to an appeal. I have slight concerns that it does, but I don't know if there's any case law that addresses that. So, flag that.
Right, we talked about that yesterday, like, we need to know if this is too constrained. And it violates the Constitution, like, you should always be able to get to the courts, the board is not a substitute for the courts. And let's get that squared away, but because it's just about JOs to qualify for exemptions and no other aspect, that's why I was willing to be, propose something that is pretty strict, and narrow, and tries to be honest.
Can I understand your argument a little more? So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So you have a slight constitutional concern. And your perspective is that the language is fine because it's so narrow, like why would, I don't understand why if it's narrower, why that would mean less of a concern.
No, if it's a constitutional issue, it's like
Yeah,
completely in or out. Like,
yes,
well, when we talked yesterday, it's, council hadn't had time because he's writing 126 pages bill for us to go dig into that deep, so it's a pending question. If it were gonna be violate the Constitution, then of course you can't, say, well, forget about it, but as a proposal, so assuming it's allowable, then it's
Okay.
like, okay, just in the case of JO rulings on whether or not you're qualified to be in an exempted area, can we have a very timely process for making those determinations? Because we've already heard since July 1 of this year that there are people who are getting running into appeals on JOs, and it's stringing the process out. So a timely ruling in the merits, that's what we're after. And I'm proposing this is perhaps a way to get there.
okay, but if we were to get new information or council had time to kind of dig into this question and we found that it did have a conflict with.
Then the Constitution wins.
Okay, just want to be clear that it's not that it's like then that somehow by making it narrow, okay. Thank you, I
I'm
understand.
giving my red.
Oh, look at that, maybe I'll put I'll grab a flag spot.
Anyway, so it was the product of the conversation yesterday afternoon. So people I know will wanna take it, think about it, is it too restrictive? Is it constitutional? And I'm sure people will probably come up with other things.
So, and just from a practical standpoint legally. I know that there's a lot of discussion that happens around appeals being weaponized for delay. But the basis of an appeal generally is when there is an ambiguity in the law. And that there is confusion about whether or not the law applies in that situation. And so I asked that as you review the next couple of pages.
Okay.
You think about whether or not things are sufficiently clear. Because you're limiting the right to appeal and the language that you have enacted isn't clear and leads to confusion and disagreement with lawyers. I could be setting,
Right, it could be, we could be setting people up to have appeal.
No, to not be able to
will you
appeal
have an
and
issue and not have a appeal?
Yeah.
Which will then lead to the constitutional case before the Supreme Court on whether that was provision constitutional.
Your point, as they say, well, Democrat.
I suppose there are situations where people weaponize the appeals process, but to suggest that a particular appeal is weaponizing prejudges the merits of the appeal. Right, I mean, if an appeal has legitimate grounds, then it's not weaponizing, it's a grievance, a citizen with a grievance.
Yeah, that's kind
And
of,
the courts have the ability to reject an appeal.
yes,
What's the summary judgment, just out of hand, but we're not even going to consider it. So I've never been convinced that the appeals are a problem, and I know sometimes they take a long time and cost someone a lot of money and grief. But it's because it's an honest disagreement as to the merits.
Yeah, I think there are probably, I wouldn't want to tail wag the dog, but there are, I think, some appeals that, at least as I've understood them, as recounted by people involved with deep knowledge, are constructive in nature, as opposed to asking kind of question of law, so in the most timely way possible. Anyway, I'm hoping that what in my mind I'm aiming for is the resolution of the legal question on its merits as quickly as possible, not so much a limitation on appeals, per se. And so that does bring in questions like how well defined are the terms of these exemptions, so that people don't have legitimate questions like, am I in or am I out? So I
the
think that's more
boundary.
the
confusing.
boundary question that we talked about yesterday, which is in the section we skipped over a little bit, yeah. Yeah,
Two things. One is, as we go to the next pages, if you suspect that there is some ambiguity, you let us know. And second thing is just as a matter of process,
Yes.
knowing that we have approximately 40 minutes.
Okay.
And thinking about our list, I've gone through and checked out some other things that I think are in here, that I'm not worried about because I see them. And it may not be that we need to get to this whole list, and that's fine, I just wanna check in about what your thoughts are on comparing like this list with the walkthrough.
yeah, what I'm wishing is we have more time. And I'm trying to find out if there are other ways for us to gain more time. One thing is we'll begin, propose that we start at 8:30 tomorrow. We could talk about even trying to gain a little more time tomorrow, starting at 8.
So you're anticipating not voting on this draft in the next day?
No, because I think, this will end up flowing into whatever we put together for the third reading.
Right, and we're not at that point. It's not likely that we'll get there tomorrow.
Well, we're gonna have to get there by tomorrow. We're gonna have to get there by Thursday,
Okay.
because they're gonna be going to the floor on Thursday. So I
Oh, so, okay, got you.
Yeah. So we'll do the best we can to find time. Unfortunately, we have 3 members of this committee who are finance that just got the yield bill. I shouldn't have thought it'd be a long day. We finished 2 nights at around 7 p.m. last week. Could be having a weekend. Sorry.
Go on, okay,
Well,
that's what it is.
What if we feel less ambivalent about it?
by the way, so while we're talking about it, can we start at 8 tomorrow? I have that, does that work? And we have a little bit of
8.
So I'm not available,
okay, alas.
so I mean, if you guys want to be that way,
Let's stick with 8:30.
I'm actually also not available then, so little means talk.
All right, well, we'll talk among ourselves at 8:30 for sure. Okay, let's keep going now and we'll sort out schedule and I'll reach out to people as we can. Enable more time.
So, the next change is on page 43, so this is one of the exemptions that's subject to the jail requirement, it's the accessory dwelling unit. Language, so until July 1, 2027, no permit or permit amendment is required for construction of improvements for an accessory dwelling unit. Units constructed pursuant to this subdivision shall not count towards the total units constructed in other projects. Or other projects. There is a definition of accessory dwelling unit a little bit further. I don't know if you want to look at that
But
or
to
if you,
just make sure we're sort of memorializing while we go by, I think that's how we end up concluding it. We're taking 80 off this. Count for jurisdictional triggers. Okay. Down below there. Same page, right, provided it's located within the same municipality.
right, so this starts. The designated area exemptions, so this is the interim housing exemptions until 2027. For 75 units or fewer. Located within a designated downtown or within 1/2 mile of its boundary. A designated new town center, growth center, or neighborhood development area. Do you maybe want to wait till I read the rest, or is it on this?
Yep, I'll wait.
Yep, so. Housing units constructed pursuant to the subdivision shall not count towards the total units constructed in other areas. And this doesn't apply with the map river corridors. Then on to page 44, there's new language on this. Provision. This language is added in this provision, the next one, and the one back in 23 that we skipped over. In an attempt to make things clear. So. Can I just? So for purposes of the subdivision, in order for a parcel to qualify for the exemption. At least 51% of the parcel shall be located within 1/2 mile of the designated downtown boundary. If the 1/2 mile around the designated downtown extends into an adjacent municipality, the legislative body of the adjacent municipality may inform the board that it does not want the exemption to extend into that area.
So that was your in, but you may opt out.
That's great.
Okay, the simple straight face test was, is the majority of the parcel in the bounded area? It's simply won't.
Do you think
Sure, we
this-
could get more complicated, but I'm trying not.
Do you think this is sufficiently clear?
So I'll just say, I have gone back and forth about the word parcel. Act 250 generally references tracts or tracts of land. I think parcel is. I would love input from the NRB on that, if they think it's clear, I think parcel here does have, wait, that's boundary. Anyway. Okay.
So there's a parcel tract question. But, okay, so assuming we get that language squared away.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, 51% of a parcel. It's gonna be so easy to figure out how to calculate that, I'm sure.
Parcels aren't they defined down to like, 54.17 acres, stuff like that?
Yep, so then everyone's gonna have to like figure out the imaginary 1/2 mile radius and how to contours through that parcel. So yeah, it should be fine.
So there's a GIS and mapping question here about the capacity to draw a crisp line and determine what's in and out. But for mental, Mr. Baker, you often talk to us about maps. Is that something feasible based on current mapping technology?
Yeah, Colin Baker here on behalf of the RBCs. Yeah, that does seem feasible. My only question about that sentence is, since it just apply about the geography that's a 1/2 mile from the downtown, but there's other geographies, the new, the neighborhood development area, the growth center, which I think, and maybe that's irrelevant, because this is only for that extra 1/2 mile, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so designated areas are are mapped to go along the parcel line, so that shouldn't be your question, but now that you're using this 1/2 boundary, that will not fall easily along parcel lines.
And it would be the same. Testing for inclusion and exclusion would apply for every expanded designated area. It's just we need village centers, we talked about village centers.
That's the next subdivision, yes. Yeah,
So that's a proposal. Then here it sounds workable from a mapping logistics point of view. And it's a way to try to sort out who's in, who's out, so that there are fewer cases going. The GOs are easier to write and less vulnerable to, less have to draw an appeal.
so again, as just mentioned, on page 44, the next subdivision deals with an exemption for 50 units or fewer on 10 acres or less. Located within a designated village center with zoning. With or within 1/4 mile of its boundary, so it strikes the language about being located in the same municipality. And then it adds the same language that I just referenced, which is for purposes of this subdivision, in order for the parcel to qualify. At least 51% of the parcel shall be located within 1/4 mile of the designated village boundary. And then at the top of page 45. This is a question, and that's why it's in bold. Or the center line of the transit route. If the 1/4 mile extends into an adjacent municipality, the legislative body may inform it doesn't want to have the exception. So we have not talked about this. I still don't know how you define transit route. But
We'd be happy to know it's on the questions list.
so, but since you are giving an exemption for areas of the municipality that are located within a designated urbanized area with over 50,000 residents. And within 1/4 mile of a transit route, you need to pick a point to measure from, and I haven't heard that discussed, yes.
All right, and why, so. You're just throwing in center line of the transit route because we're talking about the 1/4 mile
Yeah,
piece here.
I don't know, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, so I will get more into it.
We need to know what transit,
Exactly, so this, our punch list says definition of transit route needed. So that it's a. Clear thing, in the statute.
you look down. For GIS. You can make this is distance, but if you're driving it, and this line goes up, I have to have a mountain, the distance is different from the hypotenuse. Than it is on the legs.
that was your comfort.
Okay, well, that's an interesting version of that question.
It's a Paul Bunyan story, so.
Yeah. All right, so let me put down Paul Bunyan in my notes here, and we should come back to that, but just for like before we get into the. Interesting hypotheticals, just for a plain old situation, we're talking about center line of a transit route. And then you out 1/4 mile, and it's an exemption for the development of housing and housing only. Okay. Do we come to, where is the bit about 50,000 people at Citra?
It's on the prior page,
Line 14.
on page 44.
Oh, I see, thank you. I didn't see it, so that's the trigger for being eligible, and then. Is there a shared legal definition of transit route? So that we know what scale of road we're talking about, I know you gave us a Chittenden County map with green transit routes on it. But how would we refer to them precisely in law? Who defines them? I guess is the question, but Mr. Baker.
Charlie Baker for the RCs. And to be clear, we're talking about public transit routes, so this is public bus service. And apologies for in the exact tune of the previous language that I probably suggested here. But I do think this clarification is good about the center line of the transit route. Which is gonna be typically the road, so maybe some of the ones the road the bus runs on.
Is that what in RPC work? If someone calls something a transit route, it means a road with public bus service on it?
Right. Yeah, I think. Do you know if there's?
I was just looking to see if there was a definition.
So for Chittenden County, I'm thinking that means an awful lot of roads that are. Anyway,
It's most of the state highways, right? It's Route 2, Route 7, Route 15.
we don't have buses going up and down North Willard Street anymore, like.
You do, but they're already included in the designated area,
Right.
so they're already captured.
North Ave and the new North End Road is probably the one municipal road that's outside those areas.
Okay, so council, if you can. Add a definition of transit route as a route with public bus service.
Okay,
I'm just gonna fess up and say, partly wonders how many roads were implicated when. There. I know it's in an urban area, an urban area of more than. An urbanized area of over 50,000 residents. So that constrains the availability.
So if I can offer a little bit, so this is obviously the densest part of the state, right? We have over 120,000 people in this urbanized area. And for many, many years following the land use goals of the state, both the RPC and the municipalities have been trying to encourage density along these transit routes. They are pretty much the state highways, but that's some additional roads. But this is from a land use policy standpoint, where we've been trying to increase density.
Okay, well, it also addresses the whole parking issue,
Right.
we talked about stuff like that, okay? I don't mean to sound skeptical, I just want to make sure everybody knows what we're signing up for.
Yeah, and I think you did ask a very good question, I can't remember if it was in this room or outside, but about whether this is going to, encourage sprawl outside of areas where we want to see development, and I think as we mapped it, it is very much within there, and we're not trying to expand the area, so I would say for the record, we're not trying to expand any development going down the road any further than where this is the existing settlement area.
Will they necessarily have municipal water and sewer?
Yep, they're all within the water sewer service area and with zoning and bylaws, all that.
Is this when we go backwards to, or are we still going, should we
yeah.
still go forward?
no, so on page 33, this. The 51% language has been added to. This other exemption that you have in section 23. Section 23 is the. Unlimited number of the exemption for the unlimited number of priority housing projects. Located within a downtown NDA or growth center or within 1/2 mile around those designated areas. So I've added the same language there on page 33, that 50% of the parcel has to be located within the boundary, that boundary.
Mr. Baker, just clarification on this, and I appreciate you trying to get this clear. On line 3 on page 33, it uses the phrase within 1/2 mile around such designated center. When you use the phrase designated center, are you trying to refer to the downtown, the neighborhood development area and the growth center?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if that term is the generic term for all those.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder if is it, sometimes we list them out, other times we don't, I don't know. If it's working for both to be explicit, or.
Big reference.
designated, neighborhood development area, growth center. New town centers don't seem to be used much, this kind of, because I know there are three. But are they officially one of the flavors of a designated area, the way you're defining them? NTCs,
So in this section,
yes.
you are referring to downtowns, neighborhood development areas, or growth center. And so I have added the language for within 1/2 mile around such designated center.
Sorry.
So the phrase such designated center
Yeah.
is to put a boundary around that. If you think it is not clear, we can add it.
No, I get
In this section also, new town centers are not mentioned because each of the existing new town centers has either a neighborhood development area or a growth center.
it has, sorry. Either has a growth center or a.
And yeah,
Okay, such designated center, haven't just spelled them out before, sorry, I was wasn't reading the full thing. We can go, thank you.
so next, on page 45. So on Friday, you discussed a definition of accessory dwelling unit. So section 32 is added for this definition. It's being added to Act 250 for use in the temporary exemption. So an accessory dwelling unit means a distinct unit that is clearly subordinate to a single family dwelling located on an owner occupied lot. And has facilities and provisions for independent living, sleeping, food preparation, and sanitation. Provided there is compliance with all of the following. The unit does not exceed 30% or 900 square feet. And the unit is located within or pertinent to a single family dwelling. So in this draft, it is proposed to strike the reference to the property has sufficient wastewater capacity. We discussed this last week. You can include this if you want, but. It's proposed to be struck here. So you also can do that. So this is for use. As an exemption within Act 250. So requiring analysis of whether or not it has sufficient wastewater capacity does seem to be stepping into. Doing actual analysis that the permit would normally require.
And so for the sake of. Not, yeah. We discussed that someone. It was the municipality itself was in control of. Sufficient wastewater capacity. And because it's an exemption, it seems odd to like start doing more tests for things that you're not actually end up regulating. So we good to go there. Center count,
There's, we're getting into efficient food preparation places, which. Last week we were talking about kitchens, which about the appliances and
kitchenettes.
kitchenettes with the difference. Anyway, is this put in here to take the place of that discussion?
No, that discussion is later in the bill.
Correct. Thank you.
Alright, so that is most of the changes, there are a couple left, so first, on page 40, this is actually a flag. So there's a tier 2 area report due in February 2026.
Center count,
I'm sorry. I noticed that the property has sufficient wastewater capacity is no longer a requirement.
because it under municipal law, which regulates the ADUs, that is the requirement. So we're not asking Act 250 in deciding to grant an exemption to go analyze wastewater capacity. We're saying this sort of a property is exempted under Act 250. Municipal rule has many more specifications about how you properly qualify to be an ADU, including.
And this doesn't render those many more rules. To count.
No prejudice. Identifying properties, features of them. There's a lot more municipal analysis that goes into the figure.
So the tier 2 area report on page 48, so currently the language of that report does have a requirement that. As part of the report, they review whether activity over commercial activities on farms should be revised, including accessory on farm businesses. So I wanted to flag, do you want to keep this language since you are making a decision?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is it,
I mean, it is a weathered, so you could leave it.
Yeah, I don't know if the events version fits in.
Okay.
That would be a question to remote. So. Because the accessory on farm businesses capture of businesses that would want to be hosting events.
yes.
So I'd be fine to leave it, anybody, Watson?
Well, I was gonna suggest that we keep it, but I'm maybe add some qualifier, like including further adjustments to. But maybe that's implied, so
Okay.
whatever.
So just so I understand,
Yeah.
we're keeping it and we're hoping to have that conversation in the state committee.
Right, I mean. It's definitely, it's been a topic of ongoing conversation, but I'm sure. There's weddings, there's other kind of events, there's music, there's. Many flavors. These that was fun. Okay. Where to next?
Okay, so, starting on page 51, there are 6 sections added regarding the changing of dates related to the environmental justice policy.
Okay. Thank you, and here, right on cue, Ms. Byrne has turned on her video, so. This language, I had followed up with Ms. Byrne in the last. 24 hours, just to make sure that we have, this committee worked a long time on Act 154 3 years ago. One of our pieces of due diligence is to see how things unfold, and was the original roadmap reasonable? And sometimes we make adjustments to the roadmap in order to make sure that people doing their best aren't sort of operating with a set of dates that they can't meet. So with that, Ms. Byrne, do you want to talk to us and walk us, just generally introduce what we're looking at in terms of revising the environmental justice dates? And then we can take a tour through them because there are quite a few date changes.
Certainly. Hello, everyone. My name's Jennifer Byrne. I am the manager of the White River Natural Resource Conservation District. And I serve as the representative from NRCC, the Natural Resource Conservation Council, our overarching agency of the state, on the EJ Advisory Council. So I was appointed in that role, and I'd be happy to talk about these date changes and sort of the why and how we got here. But basically what you're looking at is across the board a 2-year adjustment in the dates, essentially. What happened after the law passed in 2021, there was, quite a bit of a delay in actually filling the seats of the advisory council. We didn't meet until I believe February of 2022 was the first time that we actually met as a group. I might be a little off there, but that's the first I had on my calendar. And then we only wound up meeting once. And then it was discovered that somehow the per diem language in the law that allowed for per diem to be given to the advisory council members had been struck from the law that passed entirely, which is unfortunate. You might remember at the time we were really advocating for changing the per diem and increasing it, since the majority of the EJ Advisory Council members intentionally come from, overburdened communities and really deserve to be well compensated for their time and expertise. So it was a surprise and pretty disheartening to see that actually there was no per diem language in the law that passed. So then it was changed. Oh yeah.
My recollection was that we passed out a committee with something like a very substantial sum, like 251,000, I forget, to run a full-fledged program for a number of years. And then when it went to approach, because it was an unusual structure for per diems, it became a subject of conversation. What I think was a pure mistake was that in trying to resolve that question, per diems got removed entirely, so.
Yeah, and any of the money that was sent for the law was mostly put towards the development of the mapping tool, which is actually one of the last tasks. So that's also sort of unfortunate and kind of stymies us from, that's not really what I'm here to talk about, but that is a difficulty, that we don't even really have money to run the engagement process that will lead to the eventual creation of the mapping tool. So we actually, the ANR decided to not convene the council until they could resolve and fix the language around per diem. So there was yet another multi-month delay where we didn't meet. And then we only started meeting again August 2023 was when we reconvened. And at that point, we're very behind, but we were still all acting, we were still all, very motivated to meet the deadlines, even with an adjusted, reality where we absolutely were not going to rush because this really can't be rushed. But we have a really good start on a lot of the different facets of what the council and the interagency committees are instructed to do. Then there were two coordinators hired by ANR, environmental justice coordinators, who were truly brilliant. And unfortunately, both wound up resigning. That was really a loss for us. And I think there's a lot of difficulty in being housed in the administrative seat and being entry-level positions that are tasked with a big job, a very big job of coordinating across multi-agency process. And there's a lot of folks who are very committed, and then there's a lot of folks who probably just don't understand why this is important. So I think it's a lot to put on the shoulders of an entry-level position, and they really did do a brilliant job and set us up very well. They've laid out a roadmap. So what the EJ Advisory Council and the Interagency Committee do have are several documents that are kind of the planning roadmaps for how we're going to achieve all the goals of the law. We're not ignoring any of them. We're well set up to continue down the paths that have been laid out. But yeah, I will say that it was a unanimous decision of the committee. I think the committee and the council, we've had both discussed this 2-year pushback and agreed to it in a previous meeting. And then the final thing, which I just sent out an email earlier this morning to you, because I read through what ANR put forward as their edits, and there's a very critical piece that's missing from the ANR edits, which is lifting the 8-meeting restriction. And I'm not sure if that's in your current version, but if anything, that's what I would love to see lifted from the law. I'm not sure, why, but there is a limit that this group may only meet for 8 meetings a year. I can give you the exact location of that, unless you may already have it. But yeah, it could be, it could be at least 8 instead of, no more than 8. But I think lifting that restriction would be really important, because there's so much to do, and it's tough to only, do it in 8 meetings a year.
Okay. So I am trying to do both, listen to you and look for that section. Council, we know right where to direct us. for the number of meetings allowed.
I don't think it's in here, it's probably.
I do have it. It's section 6006. And let's see, number 3, part B. Oh no, A, interagency committee. Number 3, part B,
Okay.
Oh, which is not even straight.
Yeah.
meetings.
So it was, I'm sorry, 3B. So it would have been on page 55. So without a change there, like new language that addresses the number of allowed meetings. Then we stay with current law, which caps it at 8, and that's what you're saying is an insufficient number for the work of the council. Did you propose number of meetings you would like to authorize per year?
I think I have the number wrong where it's actually just 6006B. But I might just have the wrong formatting, but yes. I don't, like I said, I wouldn't, this is just my personal opinion. I wouldn't mind having a no less than number, so that we're guaranteed to meet. But at the same time, I think what A&R had originally said was just strike any indication of a number. So, you know, it's my personal opinion to have at least 8, but that would be up to you all.
And I just want to check with our lawyer. So right now, if we move this, are we striking the language around however many number of meetings authorized? The bill will be, the law will be silent on that.
She's proposing something that's not in here.
Okay,
So if you would like to take her proposal, it would need to be added.
okay. What I didn't know is that if the ellipses on line 3 meant we weren't seeing some language about allow number of meetings.
It's on line 5 it would be on. Yes, there is an existing statute that reads. The advisory council and interagency committee shall each meet not more than 8 times per year. With at least 4 meetings held occurring jointly. That is existing law as part of 6006.
So this language doesn't speak to that, that stands, we still have 8, okay. So, Ms. Byrne, I think, you know, my experience around these kinds of, this kind of language is it always authorizes a maximum number, not a minimum. And that's in order for the state to be able to predict what kind of expenses it's creating for itself. So that's why I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I am. If 8 is too few, it's 12 sufficient, for instance, that would allow for monthly meetings.
I think a monthly meeting would be much better than what we have. And I think it's also important that the council be allowed to hold, you know, public engagement meetings or public meetings that maybe don't count as council meetings, perhaps. Or I'm not sure how to allow for that, but I think it is important that the council not be restricted from meeting, you know, as a group. But I certainly, yes, 12 would be far better than 8.
So how about this for now, given that we're, you know, kind of move right along, well, as council to change, add that language. The part that doesn't show, to add it back in with a revision from 8 to 12. Great. Sarah Down.
I often have trouble getting my head around environmental justice as what it really means. But the expression is that justice delayed is justice denied, and we are delaying that which I have not got in my head. Are we denying?
Because the dates are being pushed out. Well, Ms. Byrne is a council member. Can you speak to that point? Like pushing the dates out? My understanding is it doesn't mean there's nothing happening. We're waiting. It's that these landmarks, milestones, whatever, are called for before the council can actually get that task done.
Yes, I mean, again, personally, I'm disappointed that we have to push these dates back so far. Especially in terms of the community engagement planning requirements, which already are required by federal law. So, these agencies really need to have these meaningful community engagement plans in place that don't. So, this law is setting a deadline to come into compliance with an existing law. So they're already out of compliance, if you know what I mean. So, so yes, I at the same time, it's a balance of taking the time to doing it right. And that in order to really engage the council, I think I'd love to see it be more of an emphasis at ANR to boost the per diem rate that now that they can, since thankfully that law was changed, to make it a minimum of $50, not a maximum of $50. That would really help, I think, a lot of our council members, and be able to hold meetings around the state. Would also really help a lot of our council members to be able to engage more robustly. It's just been a real challenge, since we're leaning on, like I said, heavily burdened, overburdened people to do this work already. So yes, I think the delay is unfortunate. I also see a lot of other things not being delayed, and I'm like, why isn't there more focus on this? So I would love to see this really be a focus, and also I think rushing would be detrimental at the same time. So, but we are moving forward to not leave things to the last minute. So there will be checkpoints along the way for each of these deadlines. It's not just we wait till 2027, but we're also building in more internal checkpoints as well. And that's in our roadmaps that do exist. And I could share potentially if you're interested in seeing them.
Sure, we have about, it sounds like melodramatic, about 24 hours before we come back to a final edit on this. So if you have additional language you'd like us to consider, please do send that.
Yeah, I think you have everything, as long as, we're clear on the meeting numbers.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank you.
If this is important, as the witness says it is, why are we delaying it? Why are we changing current law to not have to do this important thing for a while?
It's I think
Advocating for putting this car at the end of the train instead of where it currently is. What's this? Where does this come from?
what's the motivation for making the change? Ms. Bernie, can you speak to that? You're a council member, but you're, I don't want to put you in an awkward spot to try to speak on behalf of the full council, but to the degree you can help us, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, just looking at the dates here, some of them have already passed and we've actually met them. So even just starting from the top, the second change you'll see there to March 15th, 2024. The agencies have already submitted their first summary report to us about their Title VI violations. And so now we have our own internal deadline that we've set for responding to them. So, that it's not that nothing has been happening. There was, at least, like I said, with all the delay at the beginning, there's been at least a year delay just already. So we do need that extra year, no matter what. I think that's fair across the board. But then, so you'll notice, even, okay, on page 2 of these edits, there's a September 15th, 2025 deadline on environmental spending that is coming up pretty rapidly. And again, we've already missed that deadline. So we do need to adjust that timeline, and we've been working on it. And we will have some type of guidance document come out by that date, no matter what. And so, but some of the further out dates, they really build on these initial, deadlines. The law builds on itself very intentionally, in terms of the order of things. So to rush to meet deadlines at this point when we're already so delayed wouldn't result in anything good. So that, I mean, that's probably as best as I can answer it, is we are really on track to meet these adjusted deadlines. And then just building in a little bit of extra time to actually do more relationship building within the agencies. This law covers so many agencies and departments that that type of like agency buy-in and understanding it takes a lot more time to build. And so that's what we're hoping to, by extending it a little bit longer, to bake in more time for us as a council to do education and relationship building within the agencies. Seemed like that was largely falling on these part-time environmental justice coordinators. And it was unrealistic to ask them to do so much. So I think that's why, the year extension is necessary because we didn't get started for a year. But then that extra year is just to kind of cushion what we really need to do it's just a deeper process than normal. It's not just words on a page, it really is about a little bit of a culture shift in terms of like how we make decisions to be more inclusive of people and really do that community engagement and the outreach earlier in the process around a lot of decisions that are getting made. So yeah, that's the best I can do to answer that.
Well, thanks. To Senator McDonald's point, if something's important, it begs the question, why would we delay doing it? So you can't speak on behalf of the administration. It's every single operating area that has to comply with the law. So I think I will reach out to the ANR, who's been our point agency on this all along, and ask them to speak with the committee. So that you're not in the very awkward and strange position of speaking for Vermont state government operating areas. I know that you can speak on the council piece, but not for what's happening across different agencies. So we'll have the administration in.
Because I thought the witness was the person who was designated to pound on the table and say, we've got to be doing this, instead of coming in and saying
Yes. We
So-
absolutely have to do this. Yes, and it's going to take time and also be ongoing. Yeah.
With non-deadlines.
So thank you very much, Ms. Byrne, for jumping in. I know we had a unpredictable schedule today, so I appreciate your flexibility. If you have any further language that you'd like us to look at, please just email the committee and council. And we'll keep it in our ongoing work list. And with that, I'd like to do one more piece of work before we go because it's so short. Section 44, amicus briefs.
Sure, so the language we added on page 56 on amicus briefs, this is adding a new section to section 8504, which is on appeals to the environmental division of the Superior Court. So any judge presiding over appeals from chapter 151 and agency appeals pursuant to subsection A of the section may allow participation in such appeals by amicus curiae in accordance with the rules of appellate procedure, rule 29.
What page you?
56.
This speaks to the,
Amicus curiae.
yes, this speaks to the fact that there are people who have information and insights to offer who may not be parties. We used to have something called material assistance. This is good, but friends of the court, not just in Act 50, but throughout federal courts, state courts, there are people who are friends of the court, sometimes organizations, people who just basically file a brief with the court, giving their advice on how. I don't know if you said it, generally based on some kind of expertise, reputation, and offering, within the brief, logical information. A logical argument.
Yeah, so are you satisfied with this rewrite of the, you wrote the concept up? Either
Yes.
review,
Yeah.
here we go. Okay, council, not a pop quiz, but this is, I don't know, if this is rules of appellate procedure, rule 29 is what? Funny I should ask.
It is the rule on amicus curiae briefs for the appellate. So they are, officers and agencies of the state may file, and then, under this, anyone else has to leave them to file, and so this is in my class. So it isn't an automatic right, it's within the judge's discretion.
Work for you?
Works for me.
Okay, work for the committee? All right, good to go. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned
So-
today.
Can I just say something? The only other thing in here I think that we haven't discussed is
Yeah,
the language on fourplexes, and I think that you should consider.
well, I'm not saying we're done. I'm not
Okay,
saying-
well, I think that's the only other change though, in here that we didn't discuss.
Only other change, maybe what page is that? 53, so not only we knocked it right off.
Are we adjourned? There's no, we're not.
Stay on. I didn't realize how close to the finish line we were. 86.
Oh, and there's. Oh, and also, there is a small change in the hotel motel
Yeah.
affordable. But you did already discuss that, but
I thought there was a lot left, there's not, so let's, if people are willing.
I don't know if you've received, sorry, go ahead, what are we doing?
Well, it's bringing up that there is,
So on 86, there's language regarding fourplexes, but you have requested, so
there. Let's just say what's happening here, and then what is Senator Watson, and then let's got some more.
so you received a proposal that you have reviewed from Zach Hale to alter the language that was in your bill.
Yeah.
You have received another proposal from, I believe, the planners, that is not currently here that you may want to consider. Cause it's a little simpler.
Okay,
And then additionally, the chair requested to have the last clause struck.
yeah, which, so we can take, you know what? My instincts tell me there's more here than meets 30 seconds worth of discussion. So let's stick with adjourning, we will schedule more time, and then we can come back to it,